everyone, happy Pride Month. My name is Shelby and this is Shelby Reads. Thank you for giving a new booktuber a chance. In this video, I'm going to be talking about butches in books in like different forms of literature. If you're interested in hearing more about LGBT plus books, but specifically sapphic books, please like, comment, and subscribe. I have a couple of disclaimers to get out of the way. Number one, I have not read all of these books. A lot of them, if not all of them, are on my TBR, but some of them are very difficult to get physical copies of. We'll go over it when we get there. And either way, I'm at least going to read a little bit about the book and give you guys a good overview about what it's about. Number two, this video is about butches only. I'm femme for Butch. I've been with my beautiful, wonderful wife for 12 years, but we've been married for 5. And I know a lot more about butch representation than I do about stud or mask representation. However, with that being said, if you guys want me to do separate videos on those, I would love to do that. I would love to add more diverse books to my TBR as well. Number 3, this is not an exhaustive list. Thankfully, there are so many books out there that represent butch people, and I just haven't had the chance to hear about them all or read them all. Please drop your recommendations in the comments. I love learning about new books that I can recommend to everybody else, particularly ones that have butches in them. So I am going to start out with books that I know for a fact butches are in, and then there's going to be one little bonus section where I feel that it's arguable, and I will give you guys my arguments. So we're going to start with classics, and this book is perhaps one of the most well-known lesbian classics. It is The Well of Loneliness by Radclyffe Hall. This book came out in 1928. Stephen is an ideal child of aristocratic parents, a fencer, a horse rider, and a keen scholar. Stefan grows up to be a war hero, a best-selling writer, and a loyal, protective lover. But Stephen is a woman, and her lovers are women. As her ambitions drive her and society confines her, Stefan is forced into desperate actions. The Well of Loneliness was banned for obscenity when published in 1928. It became an international bestseller, and for decades was the single most famous lesbian novel. It has influenced how love between women is understood for the 20th century and beyond. I have not read this one yet. This one is on my TBR for this year, but I have read actually a decent amount of nonfiction that mentions this book. So this book is apparently quite sad, and I would like to warn everybody about that first. I've heard from a lot of other sapphics that this book is quite hard to read and can be quite upsetting, but I would like to give a little bit of perspective from someone who read some of these nonfiction books that talked about this. It's really important to know that in the time period this book was published, the prevailing train of thought was that being a lesbian or gay in any way was a psychological disorder. So Radclyffe Hall's vision when making this was to be like, hey, our lives are already so sad and we're mentally ill. Can you guys just leave us alone and not add more persecution? So when you know the time period context and the reasons behind why Radclyffe Hall would write this and do such a thing, it's more understandable when you're reading it. And I think a lot of times the context for that is missing. And sometimes with these older LGBT books, we need to know that there was a very specific thing happening during these time periods that made these books the way that they are. That being said, obviously it was written in the 1920s. It is not going to be the best representation for it nowadays, but it can give you an insight onto how we've gotten where we are. Another classic we're going to be talking about is Patience and Sarah by Isabel Miller. Set in the 19th century, Isabel Miller's classic lesbian novel traces the relationship between Patience White, a painter, and Sarah Dowling, a farmer, whose romantic bond does not sit well with the puritanical New England farming community in which they live. Ultimately, they are forced to make life-changing decisions that depend on their courage and their commitment to each other. This book was first published in 1969. This book is a historical romance that features a butch for femme couple. I have not read this one yet. This one is also on my TBR. However, I really want to give a variety of butch books specifically, and that includes ones that I either haven't read, and there are a couple on here that I don't particularly like, but that I still want you to know about and make your own best case judgment scenarios about. Not everybody has the same taste or the same preference, so to me it's important that I show you the options as I see them. Next, we're going to be going into fantasy and sci-fi. The next one is The Will of the Empress by Tamora Pierce. This book came out in 2006, and it is a YA fantasy. The 4 mages of Tamora Pierce's Circle of Magic and the Circle Opens books are together again, but things aren't what they used to be. Gaja, Briar, Triss, and Sandry have grown up and grown apart since their days together at Winding Circle, and Sandry is especially disappointed with the change. When Sandry's uncle requests that her 3 old friends accompany her on a visit to Sandry's vast lands within the Empire of Namorn, the young mages discover that they've landed in a trap. Namorn's iron-willed Empress has plans for Sandry and her companions, and she has wily and powerful mages to help her. but so of course does Sandry, if only she can get them to work together. This one is also on my TBR, so I can't offer a lot of insight into this. I used to read Tamora Pierce quite frequently when I was a kid, though, around this time period actually. I just didn't read this one. I do think it's part of a series. I'm not sure if you need larger context when reading it, but just keep that in mind if it's a book you decide to read. The next fantasy is The Tiger's Daughter by Arsenault Rivera. This one came out in 2017. I have an interesting cover because it doesn't say the title, but it does on the side. I'm not really sure why. I got it from thrift books. The beginning of a new epic fantasy series. A poison spreads across an ancient land, and two women are the last hope of survival. Meet Barsalai Shafali, the infamous warrior, and Oshizuka, a divine empress in waiting. A world hangs in the balance. I just realized this is an uncorrected proof, which is very interesting. I haven't read this one yet either. This one is on my TBR. It was described as like high fantasy with like an Asian type setting. I am reading this one later this year and I am very excited to read it. The next book is another fantasy called The Unspoken Name by A.K. Larkwood. This is a duology. I'm not sure if there's going to be a third one, but the second one is The Thousand Eyes. Sorway was raised by a death cult steeped in old magic, and on her 14th birthday, she's destined to climb a mountain to sacrifice herself at the Unspoken One's shrine. Yet even as she prepares for this honor, a sorcerer offers her a new fate: leave with him and live. Turn away from her destiny and her god to become his thief, spy, and assassin. Together they could topple an empire and help him reclaim his seat of power. But Sorway will soon learn gods remember, and if you live long enough, all debts come true. This one is also on my TBR. I know I have a lot, but I'm trying to read 100 books this year, and I'm trying to keep up. I promise there are plenty I have read, but I'm very excited about this one as well. Next is Metal from Heaven by August Clark. Ichorite is progress. More durable and malleable than steel, Ichorite is the lifeblood of a dawning industrial revolution. Yan E. Chauncey owns the sole means of manufacturing this valuable metal, but his workers are on strike. They demand Chauncey research the hallucinatory illness befalling them. Marnie Honeycutt, a luster-touched child worker, stands proud at the picket line with her best friend and family. That's when Chauncey sends in the guns. Only Marnie survives the massacre. She vows bloody vengeance. A decade later, Marnie is the nation's most notorious highwayman, and Chauncey's daughter seeks an opportune marriage. Marnie's rage and the ghosts of her past will drive her to masquerade as an aristocrat, outmaneuver powerful suitors, and win the heart of his daughter, so Marnie can finally corner Chauncey and satisfy her need for revenge. But war ferments in the north and deeper grudges are surfacing. This one came out in 2024. I have not read it yet. I'm super excited to. I have it on ebook. I've heard really good things about some of the spicy scenes in here, so I am quite excited. Next is Fire Logic by Laurie J. Marks. Earth, air, water, fire. It all changed when the Fire Nation attacked. No, just kidding. These elements have sustained the peaceful people of Shaftal for generations and their subtle powers of healing, truth, joy, and intuition. But now Shaftal is dying. The Earth Witch who ruled Shaftal is dead, leaving no heir. Shaftal's ruling house has been scattered by the invading Sainites. The Shaftali have mobilized a guerrilla army against these marauders, but every year the cost of resistance grows, leaving Shaftal's fate in the hands of three people: Emil, scholar and reluctant warrior; Zanja, the sole survivor of a slaughtered tribe; and Karis, the metalsmith, a half-blood giant whose earth powers can heal, but only when she can muster the strength to hold off her addiction to a deadly drug. Separately, all they can do is watch as Shaftal falls from prosperity into lawlessness and famine. But if they can find a way to work together, they just may change the course of history. This book came out in 2002 and is part of a series. I am very excited to read this one, and hopefully it's good, so I will be able to read the whole series. I love when they're series, so I'm able to read multiple books about butches. It makes me very happy. Finally, two that I have read that I can sing the praises of. This trilogy is about to be completed later this year, I believe September, is The Unbroken and The Faithless by C.L. Clark. These are part of the Magic of the Lost series. Terrain is a soldier, stolen as a child and raised to kill and die for the Empire. She owes loyalty to only her fellow conscripts, but now her company has been sent back to her homeland to stop a rebellion, and the ties of blood may be stronger than she thought. Luca needs a turncoat. Someone desperate enough to tiptoe the bayonet's edge between treason and orders. Someone who can sway the rebels toward peace, while Luca focuses on what really matters, getting her uncle off of her throne. Through assassinations and massacres in bedrooms and war rooms, Terrain and Luca will haggle over the price of a nation. but some things aren't for sale. These books deal very heavily with colonization and the effect that that can have. I think C.L. Clarke's work is absolutely extraordinary. I've seen some lower ratings for these, but I honestly think that they're fantastic. If you're looking for a fantasy that deals with revolutionary stuff, but also has a lot of court intrigue, this series is for you. I would say that the first one definitely has more action and more on the field. There's a revolution, more fighting people type of stuff, whereas this one is definitely more court intrigue and more things that are going on. There are still very deadly consequences to the court intrigue, but they are different books. I have been so excited for the third one to come out. I genuinely cannot wait to read it. I am going to be lined up at the bookstore when it comes out. So a lot of Butch fantasy kind of has overlap with sci-fi, and that's a very interesting place to be, which is why the fantasy and sci-fi categories for me were very difficult to decide which should fall in which. But the next books are the Locked Tomb series, Gideon the Ninth, Harrow the Ninth, Nona the Ninth, and hopefully someday soon the fourth book, Elector the Ninth, will come out. This is part of the Locked Tomb series by Tamsyn Muir. The Emperor needs necromancers. The ninth necromancer needs a swordswoman. Gideon has a sword, some dirty magazines, and no more time for undead nonsense. Tamsyn Muir's Gideon the Ninth unveils a solar system of swordplay, cutthroat politics, and lesbian necromancers. Her characters leap off the page as skillfully animated as necromantic skeletons. The result is a heart-pounding, epic science fantasy. Yeah, so you've probably heard the tagline, lesbian necromancers in outer space. I would say that these books are so much more than this. It's no surprise to anyone who's on my booktube or my book talk that this series is my absolute favorite series of all time. I think about this series every day. I write fan fiction about this series. This series has like ridiculous meme jokes from like Tumblr put in some of the most devastating ways you can imagine. Everyone talks about how this is enemies to lovers. We have not gotten to lovers yet, I must warn you. And this is also not a romance series. Like, there is a romance in it, in my opinion, and there is so much romantic language. It is so very romantic, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. I could literally do an unhinged deep dive on all of these books, but I would probably wait until the fourth one comes out. I haven't gone back through Nona, but on my second read, I did all the times I felt Gideon and Harrow were in love with each other. Gideon and Harrow are quite young. They are 18 and 17 in the beginning of the first book, but it is still written in such a compelling, interesting way that I truly believe that this is one of the best written series of all time, and I truly enjoy every second that I spend reading it. You will also suffer a lot of pain if you read these books. I don't want you to be delusional. They are very painful, but in like the best, most beautiful way you can imagine. And because of necromancy, not to spoil anything at all, but is what's dead really dead if you can reanimate it? We are going to find out. The next one is also a sci-fi fantasy. It is the Traitor Cormorant by Seth Dickinson. Tomorrow on the beach, Cormorant will look up from the sand of her home and see red sails on the horizon. The Empire of Masks is coming, armed with coin and ink, doctrine and compass, soap and lies. They will conquer Baru's island, rewrite her culture, criminalize her customs, and dispose of one of her fathers. But Baru is patient. She'll swallow her hate, prove her talent, and join the masquerade. She will learn the secrets of the Empire. She'll be exactly what they need, and she'll claw her way high enough up the rungs of power to set her people free. In a final test of her loyalty, the masquerade will send Baru to bring order to distant Ardwin, a snake pit of rebels, informants, and seditious dukes. Ardwin kills everyone who tries to rule it. To survive, Baru will need to untangle this land's intricate web of treachery and conceal her attraction to the dangerously fascinating Duchess Tyne Who. But Baru is a savant in games of power, as ruthless in her tactics as she is fixated on her goals. In the calculus of her schemes, all ledgers must be balanced and the price of liberation paid in full. This book series so far is a trilogy, and I just saw on Goodreads that there is supposed to be a fourth one coming out. I have not read this one yet, but I have heard fantastic things about it. I also have this, I'm pretty sure, on my TBR for this year. I am so excited to read this. If you guys want a review, please keep your eyes out on my YouTube shorts or my Instagram or my book talk. I post monthly wrap-ups at the very least. I'm very excited for this book. The next book is The Queens of Innislear by Tess Gratton. The erratic decisions of a prophecy obsessed king have drained Innislear of its wild magic, leaving behind a trail of barren crops and despondent subjects. Enemy nations circle the once bountiful isle, sensing its growing vulnerability, hungry to control the ideal port for all trade routes. The king's three daughters battle hungry Gala, master manipulator Reagan, and restrained star-blessed Elia. Know the realm's only chance of resurrection is to crown a new sovereign, proving a strong hand can resurrect magic and defend itself. But their father will not choose an heir until the longest night of the year, when prophecies align and a poison ritual can be enacted. Refusing to leave their future in the hands of blind faith, the daughters of Innislear prepare for war. But regardless of who wins the crown, the shores of Innis will weep the blood of a house divided. This series is a duology. The second book is Lady Hotspur. The first book came out in 2018. The second one came out in 2020. I have not read them yet. I'm very excited about it. The description sounds very promising. Next is the duology. The first book is The Scapegracers, and the second one is The Scratch Daughters by H.A. Clark. Skulking near the bottom of West High's social pyramid, Sideways Pike lurks under the bleachers doing magic tricks for bottles of Coke. As a witch, lesbian, and lifelong outsider, she's had a hard time making friends. But when the three most popular girls pay her $40 to cast a spell at their Halloween party, Sideways gets swept into a new clique. The unholy trinity are dangerous angels, sugar-coated rattlesnakes, and now, unbelievably, Sideways' best friends. Together, the four bond to form a ferocious and powerful coven. They plan parties, cast curses on dude bros, try to find Sideways a girlfriend, and elude the fundamentalist witch-finders hell-bent on stealing their magic. But for Sideways, the hardest part is the whole having friends thing. Who knew that balancing human interaction with supernatural peril could be so complicated? Rich with urgency of feral youth, The Scapegracers is an atmospheric, voice-driven novel of the occult that explores magic, growing up, and complex female friendship with all the rage of a teenage girl. I have not read these yet. These are YA fantasy. I am very excited about them. I got this one on sale, so I ordered this one from Thrift Books. It's a win-win. I really wish there was more Butch identity in YA overall. There are some genres here that I had a hard time trying to fill out because there just isn't enough of them, but I am very excited to be reading these soon. The next is The Winged Histories by Sofia Samatar. Four women, soldier, scholar, poet, and socialite, are caught up on different sides of a violent rebellion. As war erupts and their families are torn apart, they fear they may disappear into the unwritten pages of history. Using the sword and the pen, the body and the voice, they struggle not just to survive, but to make history. This is described as a high fantasy sci-fi series. There are 2 books in the series. I don't think you have to read both of them to understand the one that I just talked about, but the one I just talked about was published in 2016. And I'm very excited to read this one as well. I don't have any insights, unfortunately. Again, that TBR, my TBR is almost 1,000 books. It is getting out of control. Next is the Drowning Empire series by Andrea Stewart. The first book is The Bone Shard Daughter, which I have read, and I need to read the next 2, The Bone Shard Emperor, and the third one I cannot remember what it's called for the life of me. The Emperor's reign has lasted for decades, his mastery of bone shard magic powering the animal-like constructs that maintain law and order, but now his rule is failing, and revolution is sweeping across the Empire's many islands. When the Emperor refuses to recognize his daughter as heir to the throne, she vows to prove her worth by mastering the forbidden art of bone shard magic. Yet such magic carries a deadly cost. These are definitely less heavy on the necromancy. Like, bone shard magic is interesting, and I had a good time. The sapphic relationship is also between 2 side characters. One of them gets their own POV, so it's not as though they are completely unrelevant to the main storyline or that we only get to see them through one character. That's not true. But I do just want to warn you, because I feel sometimes people go into fantasy books, particularly adult fantasy books, and they think that it's going to be the main character because no one warned them. I'm warning you right now. I enjoyed the first book. We'll see how the second one and the third one are, but I still wanted to warn you that the sapphics are not the main characters. The next is A Master of Jinn by P. Deli Clark. Cairo, 1912. Though Fatma el-Shawari is the youngest woman working for the Ministry of Alchemy, Enchantments, and Supernatural Entities, she's certainly not a rookie, especially after preventing the destruction of the universe last summer. So when someone murders a secret brotherhood dedicated to one of the most famous men in history, Al-Yahiz, Agent Fatma is called onto the case. Al-Yahiz transformed the world 50 years ago when he opened up the veil between the magical and mundane realms before vanishing into the unknown. This murderer claims to be Al-Yahiz, returned to condemn the modern age for its social obsessions. His dangerous magical abilities instigate unrest in the streets of Cairo that threaten to spill over onto the global stage. Alongside her ministry colleagues and her clever girlfriend, Siti, Agent Fatma must unravel the mystery behind the imposter to restore peace to the city or face the possibility he could be exactly who he seems. So this is described as a fantasy historical fiction with some steampunk and mystery and a bit of science fiction according to Goodreads. I have not read this one yet either. There is more than one in the series. I am very excited to read this. I like reading more representation for other cultures, especially when it's in fantasy. It makes fantasy so much more interesting because there's only so many times you can redo medieval Europe, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. Next, we have another Tamora Pierce book called Alana the First Adventure. This is a middle grade book. From now on, I'm Alan of Treeband, the younger twin. I'll be a knight. And so Alana of Treebond begins the journey to knighthood. Though a girl, Alana has always craved the adventure and daring allowed only for boys. Her twin brother Tom yearns to learn the art of magic. So one day they decide to switch places. Tom heads for the convent to learn magic. Alana, pretending to be a boy, is on her way to the castle of King Rold to begin her training as a page. But the road to knighthood is not an easy one. As Alana masters the skills necessary for battle, she must learn to control her heart and to discern her enemies from her allies. This is a middle grade book, as I said. I don't know if I read this in middle school. I feel like I probably did, but I don't remember it, and I plan to reread it. Next is A Hunger Soft and Wild by Moira Darling. I have not read this one either, but I saw it advertised on TikTok. It is a romantasy. A dangerous mercenary, a runaway vampire, a hunger neither can resist. Arya Valian spent her life under the iron rule of a vampire clan who sees mercy as weakness. Now hunted, wounded, and desperate for freedom, she flees into the wild, only to be found by a hardened mercenary with sharp eyes and an even sharper blade. Roan should be just another danger in a world that seeks to devour her, yet something about the woman makes Arya hesitate, and hunger. Roan Tarlick knows better than to get involved. She spent years selling her sword, keeping her past buried, and her heart untouched. Helping a runaway vampire is a mistake, one that should have ended the moment Arya could stand on her own. And yet, every night by the fire, every stolen glance, every quiet confession sinks its teeth into Roan's resolve. When the shadows catch up to them, will they survive the hunt, or will they be forced to sacrifice everything for a love they never meant to find? This is apparently a spicy romantasy. I have not read it yet. I'm very excited to read it. I've been dying to find some romantasy that doesn't make me want to bash my own teeth in, you know? So here's hoping. The next is a recent release, The Incandescent by Emily Tesh. I just finished this with my book club not long ago. It was also in my reading wrap up. If you want a fuller picture of how I felt about it, there's some spoilers in that. If you feel so inclined, please go look at it. Dr. Walden is the director of magic at Chetwood Academy and one of the most powerful magicians in England. Her days consist of meetings, teaching A-level invocation to 4 talented, chaotic sixth formers, more meetings, and securing the school's boundaries from demonic incursions. Walden is good at her job. No, Walden is great at her job. But demons are masters of manipulation. It's her responsibility to keep the school with its 600 students and centuries-old legacy safe. And it's possible the entity Walden most needs to keep her school safe from is herself. This is a very recent release. It came out in May, I believe. There is a Butch main character named Laura Kenning. I have mixed feelings about her, and I honestly have mixed feelings about this book as a whole. I ended up bumping it up to about 4 stars because of how a certain thing ended, but if you want more full thoughts, again, please go to my April-May reading wrap-up. I talk more about this book. I think that if you like dark academia and you like fantasy and that kind of stuff, you might really enjoy this. For me, there was a lot of portions that were quite boring, or I didn't really understand, and the magic kind of got on my nerves. But it does have Butch representation, so if you're interested in that, feel free to check it out. Next, we are going to be taking a step into the literary side of things, and we couldn't have any video about Butches without Stone Butch Blues by Leslie Feinberg. Woman or Man, this internationally acclaimed novel looks at the world through the eyes of Jess Goldberg, a masculine girl growing up in the Ozzie and Harriet McCarthy era and coming out as a young butch lesbian in the pre-Stonewall gay drag bars of a blue-collar town. Stone Butch Blues traces a propulsive journey, powerfully evoking history and politics while portraying an extraordinary protagonist full of longing, vulnerability, and working-class grit. This once underground classic takes the reader on a roller coaster ride of gender transformation and exploration, and ultimately speaks to the heart of anyone who has ever suffered or gloried in being different. I have read this book, and I would like to give you guys some warnings before you just jump into it, because I feel people recommend this book without thoroughly warning people enough. There is R and SA in this book. There is a lot of homophobia and transphobia, among many other things. Please look at the trigger warnings on Storygraph, I beg of you. This book narratively to me was very similar to Tipping the Velvet by Sarah Waters. It feels like a very much meandering through terrible things in life that keep happening to this one poor protagonist. This does have a very hopeful ending, and it is a very good read. It's not a difficult book to read once you're reading it. Like, it's not difficult upon your intelligence, if that makes sense. It does very much feel like it's a working class narrative. It is a very difficult read though, and I feel that people like to use this to encompass all of butchness into one novel, and that's not how that works. works. I also want to bring to your attention, everyone is trying to find the very expensive copies of this, like out and about in the real world. And if you're a collector and you want to grab that, I totally understand. But for people who just want to read this book, you can buy this paperback copy on Leslie Feinberg's website for only $13. That's how I bought it. There's also a free PDF if you don't have the money to be spending on this. But please do not think the only way you can get this book is by spending like $300. It's just not true. Please don't drain your wallet so that you can read this. Okay. The next book is Diket by Jenny Fran Davis. I have not read this book. It is adult literary. It just came in. I'm very excited about it. Sasha and Jesse are professionally creative, erotically adventurous, and passionately dysfunctional 20-somethings making a life together in Brooklyn. When a pair of older, rich lesbians, prominent news host Jules Todd and her psychotherapist partner Miranda invite Sasha and Jesse to their country home for the holidays, they're quick to accept, even if the trip includes a third couple, Jesse's best friend Lou and their cool girl flame Darcy, whose queer cloud Sasha ridicules yet desperately wants. As the late December afternoons blur together in a haze of debaucherous home-cooked feasts and sweaty sauna confessions, so too do the guests' shifting motivations. When Jesse and Darcy collaborate on an ill-fated live-stream performance, a complex web of infatuation and jealousy emerges, sending Sasha down a spiral of destructive rage that threatens each couple's future. Unfolding over 10 heady days, Diket is an unforgettable love story at the crossroads of queer nonconformity and seductive normativity. With propulsion, plotting, and sexy, wickedly entertaining prose, Jenny Fran Davis captures the vagaries of desire and the many devastating places in which we seek recognition. I bought this from Thrift Books, and it's actually an advanced reader's copy, which I think is really cool. I didn't do that on purpose, but I am excited to read this, even though it sounds messy. Next is a book that I have read, which is called Bulletproof Butches by Che Villanueva. This book is difficult to get. I'm not going to pretend to you that it wasn't. I spent $30-something on this, and it was the only copy on Thrift Books. I don't know anywhere that this book is available online, and I am sorry for that. But if you like to collect these kinds of books and you really just want more Butch books, maybe keep an eye for it out on Thrift Books. Fiction and poetry from one of lesbian literature's most uncompromising voices, never afraid to address the harsh realities of working-class lesbian life, Che Villanueva charts territory frequently overlooked in the age of lesbian chic. Praise for Che Villanueva's Jesse's Song. With the release of Filipino/Irish writer Che Villanueva's Jesse's Song, readers will get an unforgettable taste of pugnacious butches, queer guardian angels, and their colorful lesbian street life. And that's a quote from Girlfriends. There's a couple quotes on here. This book came out in the 90s. Makes me a little sad because it was $7.95 and I spent a lot of money on it, comparatively at least. I will warn you that parts of this book are quite rough. There is a prison story in here that was quite difficult for me to read and that I didn't even really particularly enjoy. However, I did overall quite enjoy this book, and I do think it's worth a mention anyway. I think we had a lot of really interesting literature coming out in the 90s that we didn't know how lucky it was to be getting out there. I, of course, didn't know because I was born in 93. So 0 through 7-year-old me could not have a beautiful understanding. Not quite yet. But it is something to think about reading if you're interested in literary works. Next is a book that I have not read called The Butches of Madison County. This is by Ellen Orlean. This hilarious parody pokes fun both at Robert Waller's bestseller and at lesbian romance novels. Came out in 1995. There really isn't any more information out on Goodreads, which is quite unfortunate. But I am looking forward to reading it. It's on my list to buy at some point. Again, I have quite a long TBR, so we'll get there when we get there. Next, I have for you a pulp novel. One of the only ones. I need to dig more into pulp novels, honestly. This is Bebo Brinker by Anne Bannon. This is probably one of the most well-known pulp novels. This is also part of a series, which I did not know, and I got this pretty recently. Lost, lonely, boyishly appealing. This is Bebo Brinker. She landed in New York fresh off the farm. Her only certainty was that she was different. So innocent, she did not notice that women watched her when she entered the room. This was originally published in 1962. There are newer reprints of this. I'm quite excited to read this. It is a shorter read, and I'm hoping to be able to read all of the series. I know that pulp novels do not have the most lovable reputation. However, I do still think it's important to know our history and to be reading our history in general. And Anne Bannon was a lesbian from the time period. She's still alive and well, actually, which is crazy. She's in like her 90s. But I'm quite excited to be able to read this and the rest of the series. Now we're in the romance category, and our first one is The Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe. This is a YA historical romance. I have not read this one yet. The sequel is called Scattered the Light. I've not read this one yet. It's on my list for this year. I also have the second one on my list for this year. But it follows a butch lesbian who is Chinese, also in the 1950s at the bar scene, trying to figure stuff out for herself. This book is also so important because it is being challenged at schools, and there's a lot of book banning going around trying to get this book specifically. Please remember that a lot of our books were banned from all kinds of things, and that reading is still an act of resistance. They didn't want women to be able to read. Please remember that. I know that lesbian and sapphic book spaces aren't usually the places that are like, it's just a book, we don't have to think critically about everything. But there are still probably some people who think that way. There is a reason they are trying to ban literature about us. Please keep that in mind. This one I just finished, so I can give you quite the information on this. This is Queerly Beloved by Susie Dumond. This is an adult contemporary romance. It's not exactly contemporary because it's set in 2013, but it's more contemporary. It's more contemporary than not, you know? Amy, a semi-closeted queer baker and bartender in mid-2010s Tulsa, has spent a lifetime putting other people's needs before her own. Until, that is, she hits it off with Charlie, a brilliant, attractive engineer who's just moved to town. Suddenly, Amy's found someone she actually wants. Her tight-knit, chosen family is thrilled she's finally moving on from her ex. Mostly, though, they want Amy to find a way to show up for love and life as her authentic self. When a one-off gig subbing for a bridesmaid turns into a full-time business, thanks to Amy's baking talents, crafting skills, and years watching rom-coms and Say Yes to the Dress, her deep desire to please kicks into overdrive at her own expense. It's not until Amy's precarious balancing act strains her relationships to the breaking point that she must decide what it looks like to be true to herself and if she has the courage to try. I just finished this one recently. I wouldn't say that they're like butch femme in the traditional sense, but obviously this took place in the 2010s, so it is different. I also feel like because I came out specifically in 2013, this is so specific. This is also when my wife and I got together, that I can speak to the weird phrasing of things, especially with like identities and presentations like butch and femme, and there was a lot of pushback to it. I feel that the 70s lesbian feminism continues in a cycle to reemerge, and I actually feel like it's making a reemergence right now, where we're back to shaming butches and femmes again. They describe themselves as like femme of center and masc of center, but it doesn't feel that way quite to me, especially where Charlie is concerned. She dresses up in a suit for work. She's very butch in my opinion, not just in like how she's dressed, but also how she's representing herself and how she's showing up for things. I liked this book actually quite a lot, and I felt that it discussed a lot of how the wedding industry, particularly in 2013 in states where gay marriage was not legal yet, working in that industry must be particularly painful for the queer people who could not get married. And I was old enough in 2015 when gay marriage was legalized in the entire country to have been genuinely surprised because I thought it would never happen. So I thought that this was a good, cute read. It's kind of a less heavy thing. If you're interested in a cute little romance, I would definitely pick this up. It was a good read. Just As You Are by Camille Kellogg is a contemporary romance. It is a Pride and Prejudice retelling. Liz Baker works at the Netherfields, a queer magazine in New York that's on the verge of shutting down until it's bought at the last minute by two wealthy lesbians. Liz knows she's lucky to still have a paycheck, but it's hard to feel grateful with investor Daria Fitzgerald slashing budgets, canceling Bagel Fridays, and password protecting the color printer to prevent frivolous use. When Liz overhears Daria scoffing at her listicles, she knows that it's only a matter of time before her impulsive mouth gets her fired. But as Liz and Daria wind up having to spend more and more time together, Liz starts to see a softer side to Daria. She's funny, thoughtful, and likes the way Liz's gender presentation varies between butch and femme. Despite the evidence that Daria isn't to be trusted, Liz can't keep hating her, and it's even harder for her to resist the chemistry between them. This page-turning, sexy, and delightfully funny rom-com celebrates queer culture, chosen family, and falling in love against your better judgment. I actually really liked this book. So it has a butch and then also a character, Liz, who kind of, I would say, is like presentation fluid and moves back and forth pretty seamlessly throughout the book. If you really like enemies to lovers, if you really love Pride and Prejudice, which I feel like most queer people really like Pride and Prejudice, I mean, who wouldn't? This is definitely a book for you. I seriously enjoyed this book. Please give it a go. Next is Kiss Her Once for Me by Allison Cochran. This is a holiday romance. 1 year ago, recent Portland transplant Ellie Oliver had her dream job in animation and a Christmas Eve meet-cute with a woman at a bookstore that led her to fall in love over the course of a single night. But after a betrayal the next morning and the loss of her job soon after, she finds herself adrift, alone, and desperate for money. Finding work at a local coffee shop, she's just getting through the days until Andrew, the shop's landlord, proposes a shocking, drunken plan, a marriage of convenience that will give him his recent inheritance and alleviate Ellie's financial woes and isolation. They make a plan to spend the holidays together at his family cabin to keep up the ruse. But when Andrew introduces his new fiancée to his sister, Ellie's shocked to discover it's Jack, the mysterious woman she fell for over the course of one magical Christmas Eve the year before. Now Ellie must choose between the safety of a fake relationship and the risk of something real. I have not read this book yet. I'm very excited about it. I didn't know she had like an animation job. I actually have 2 animation degrees, so that's kind of crazy. I think I'll really end up enjoying it. I am so particular about holiday romances though because I can only read them in December. My brain will not allow me to do it any other time of the year. So I'm going to have to try and shove it in at the end of the year, but hopefully it will be good. Next we have Get It Right by Skye Killane. A butch lesbian parolee, the pretty pansexual nurse who got away, is this their second chance at a happily ever after? Finn is finally out of prison, which is great. Having no job, no car, and no place to sleep except her cousin's couch, not so great. Plus her felony theft conviction isn't doing wonders for her employment prospects, so she can't afford her migraine meds without the public clinic. The last thing she ever expected was for the gal who stole her heart to come walking down that clinic's hallway. Vivi, the manicure-loving nurse who spent 2 years fighting the prison system to get proper medical care for her patients, including Finn. Finn could never believe she imagined the attraction and affection between them, but acting on that in prison, especially as a nurse and patient, had been a serious no way. She's had 8 months to get over Vivi, who abruptly left her job without saying goodbye. Finn is over it. Honest. It's totally and completely fine. Except Vivi here and now doesn't seem fine, and Finn couldn't live with herself if she didn't try to help. Is fate offering Finn a second chance? Or is finding love as likely as finding a job with health insurance? The author also says on Goodreads that there are content warnings on their website. That's lovely. I've not read this book, but I'm looking forward to it. We get the idea. I have a lot on my TBR. I'm trying to get there, I promise. The next book is The Next Chapter by Camille Kellogg, the same one who wrote Just As You Are. Katrina Kelly is a former child star with 5 blockbuster movies under her belt and a face that's instantly recognizable to most of America. Unfortunately, her career ended with her teens. Now she's 24, running out of money, and spends most of her nights alone Googling things like, how do I know if I'm bi or gay? She's desperate to rebrand herself as a serious adult actress and restart her career at any cost. Jude Thacker, a butch bookseller at The Next Chapter, doesn't want to admit she might be stuck. After all, she's running the queer feminist bookstore of her dreams with a staff of chosen family. Sure, she hasn't even tried to go on a first date in 2 years. And she may have a tiny problem with panic attacks, but as long as her life stays small and tidy, she's fine. When Kat and Jude meet in the bookstore, Kat realizes that coming out as queer is the perfect way to transform her image. She and Jude can date for a few weeks, cause a media firestorm, and then Kat will move on. But what's meant as a temporary publicity stunt quickly turns into real feelings for both women. As the media scrutiny intensifies, each must decide what's real, what's not, and if true love is worth losing everything they believe is keeping them safe. This book came out June 10th of 2025. It is a new release. I cannot emphasize how much I enjoy her other book and how much I think I'm going to enjoy this book. I'm super excited to read it. The next book is Make Room for Love by Darcy Liao. Starting over is hard. Falling for her gorgeous butch roommate might make it impossible. When a tall, stunning butch protects Mira from her ex-boyfriend at the club and offers her a safe place to stay, Mira should be relieved, not flustered. She's not into women. Yet this tough electrician with curves for days makes Mira's heart race like never before. But Isabel, wounded by grief, forces Mira to keep her distance, until Mira's desperate to win a union election at work. And only Isabel has the experience to teach her how. Soon they're lingering over dinner, teasing each other as the apartment heats up, and Isabel is making her coffee every morning, hanging her shelves, giving her smoldering looks before bed, but Mira can't afford temptation, not after living with her nightmare ex. No matter how well Isabel takes care of her or how much Isabel needs healing too, she can't risk her freedom or her heart. This also has trans representation, which is just lovely. This came out late 2024. I am super excited to read this one as well. I really need to catch up on romance. I feel the problem is that I had quite a few letdowns in the romance department, so I've been slower to pick them back up. but I really do need to give some of these new ones a try. Next is Courting the Countess by Jenny Frame. This book came out in 2016. It's a historical romance. I do have a separate historical section, but like if it's not focused on romance, that's where I'm putting it. This one is more focused on the actual romance. Professor of Archaeology Henrietta Harry Knight becomes Countess of Axdale upon her father's death and takes a sabbatical from Cambridge University to begin refurbishing the long neglected and rundown Axdale Hall. The child of a loveless marriage, witness to her father's infidelities and her mother's pain, Harry has no intention of ever falling in love. Annie Brannigan is a survivor, remaining positive through hardships. As an agency housekeeper, she moves from post to post with her daughter Riley, taking care of people who have everything she will never have. Annie's greatest wish is to find her happy ever after. Can love restore the Countess's heart and the crumbling Axdale Hall? Or will the first foundations of love turn to dust? I am excited to read this one. I can't tell what time period it's supposed to be in, but I am still quite excited to read it. Next is Dowry's Meadow by C.C. Gonzalez. This one is also a historical romance. This one is also very steamy, apparently. At a young age, Alexandra has seen the horrors of men and greed forcing her to become someone else. Now, going by as Alexander Dowry III, she has to live with the repercussions of her mother's murder and uphold the lifestyle of a rich man in a small town during the Victorian era. Meanwhile, Eleanor Stonar wants to believe that the reasons for her arranged marriage to her husband, Alexander, are for other reasons other than financial stability. Love blooms between the two women, but how long will Alexandra hide who she really is? There is apparently a not detailed essay, and there is a cliffhanger. I am quite excited to read this book because I read a lot about female husbands in one of the history books I just read, and I really think that there should be more romances about female husbands. Whether the authors decide to take it as the transgender man route or the secretly a butch woman hiding to protect herself and to marry a woman route, I think either are quite fascinating, and I think that we shouldn't be afraid to explore that more in historical fiction. I'm really excited to read this one. Next is Straight Girl Next Door by S.E. Chandler. She's not her first love, but could she be her last? Billy is curious when her neighbor's daughter moves back home after a divorce. A couple of gruff encounters with Andy, and Billy thinks she understands why she's suddenly single. Except she can't stop checking out Andy's sculpted legs and reveling in her IDGAF personality. After a brunch disaster with crying in public, and a lighthearted game night with friends, Billy starts wondering what's next on Andy's agenda, and if it could be her. This is an adult romance that came out in 2024. I did actually read this one. This one was not my favorite. I gave it like a 2.5, I'm pretty sure. It just was not as good as I thought it could have been. I also always get kind of icked out when they put straight girl in the title when clearly they're not straight, based upon the narrative. That being said, I don't want to discourage other people from potentially reading this, especially since it's an indie author. Please consider reading it if you want to, but it's just not for me. And I think that's fine. We all have our own tastes, you know? Next is another holiday one called Season of Love by Helena Greer. Miriam Blum has no choice but to face the past she thought she'd left behind when she inherits her great aunt's Christmas tree farm in this witty, glittering, heartfelt rom-com. Thanks to her thriving art career, Miriam Blum finally has her decouped glitter ducks in a row, until devastating news forces her to a very unwanted family reunion. Her beloved great-aunt Cass has passed away and left Miriam part owner of Kerrigan's, her ironically Jewish-run Christmas tree farm. But Miriam's plans to sit Shiva, avoid her parents, then put Kerrigan's in her rearview mirror are spoiled when she learns the business is at risk of going under. To have any chance of turning things around, she'll need to work with the farm's grumpy manager, as long as the attraction sparking between them doesn't set all their trees on fire first. Again, I haven't read this one either. Again, very short window for holiday ones, in my opinion. You can do whatever you want. I personally can't do it if it's not slightly before Christmas / Hanukkah area. But I have heard great things about this one from many other people. We are now moving on to historical fiction that has less of a romantic focus. The first one I want to present is Tipping the Velvet by Sarah Waters. I'm a big fan of Sarah Waters. I have read all of her LGBT books. I refuse to read her non-LGBT ones. Sorry, Sarah. Nan King is captivated by the music hall phenomenon Kitty Butler, a male impersonator extraordinaire treading the boards in Canterbury. Through a friend at the box office, Nan manages to finally meet her heroine. Soon after, she becomes Kitty's dresser, and the two head to London, where they begin a glittering career as music hall stars in an all-singing and dancing double act. Behind closed doors, they admit their attraction to each other, and their affairs begin. Now, I would hesitate to call these historical ones Butch for Femme, because obviously Butch Femme is a very specific identity, but I do think we need to acknowledge that that identity did come from somewhere. It didn't come from nothing. And there's a lot of cross-dressing and women pretending to be men within our history as sapphics, right? And I have a great history book that can like talk about a lot of that. I'm going to have a bonus video about nonfiction to read for Pride if you guys are interested in that. But again, it doesn't come from nowhere, and Nan takes a very decided butch and more masculine turn by the end. I would warn you that this book is a lot like So Much Blues in the fact that there is just a lot of very heavy topics. It's quite difficult at parts. This book also has a happy ending, and there is also a BBC miniseries on this. I really adored this book, but about halfway through, I really started to wonder, why in the hell am I reading this? But by the end, I feel like it really gets to a great place, and it's a very enjoyable read in my opinion. Another one from Sarah Waters is The Night Watch. This is also historical. Moving back through the 1940s, through air raids, blacked out streets, illicit partying, and sexual adventure, to end with its beginning in 1941, Sarah Waters' new novel tells the story of 4 Londoners, 3 women and a young man with a past, whose lives and those of their friends and lovers connect in tragedy, stunning surprise, and exquisite turns, only to change irreversibly in the shadow of a grand historical event. This book is quite good, but it is not like her other books in my opinion. There are 2 different butch characters. There is one that gets their own POV that is a butch character, and there is another one who is with a femme character who is the other POV. There's a lot of messiness and like queer intertwining of relationships and past relationships. I enjoyed this book, but I acknowledge that it's really not for everyone. Even I, for parts of the book, was like, why am I reading this man's POV? This is kind of killing it. But I promise that it's quite a good book and that it's pretty enjoyable if you enjoy historical stuff. Next is Grease Paint by Hannah Levin. Set against a backdrop of 1950s New York, this experimental novel follows an ensemble cast of all singing, all dancing, butch dykes, and Yiddish anarchists through eternal Friday nights around the table and at the bar. In one of many bars, Frankie Gold sings while Sammy Silver plays piano after a day job at the anarchist newspaper. The Butch Piano Players Union meets in the corner next to the jukebox. Lore smokes on the back steps, sweaty thigh to thigh with Vic. Frankie's childhood sweetheart Lily turns up at yet another bar to see a second Sammy play every Friday night. And before all that, there's always dinner at Marge's. Fabulated out of oral histories, anthologies, as well as fiction of the butch femme bar scene and Yiddish anarchist tradition, Grease Paint is a rollicking whirlwind of music and politics, the currents of community embodied and held inside the bar. This one came out in 2024, so it is relatively new as well. The next historical one is Crazed by Margaret Vandenberg. My brain wanted to say Vanderberg, but that's not correct. Fresh off the boat from Roaring 20s Paris, Henrietta Henry Adams lands in New York in the midst of the queer craze that is taking the city by storm. An art critic by day and lady lover by night, she ventures into the clandestine worlds of speakeasies and drag balls, which free her from the tyranny of the gender binary. Fun-loving slummers crash the party, flocking to see queer performers at the Astor Hotel and the Cotton Club. Broadway stars rub elbows with Harlem Renaissance luminaries at the Hamilton Lodge Masquerade Ball. But the revelry can't last forever. Faced with Depression-era crackdowns, Henry calculates the risk of fighting back, prompting a decision with far-reaching consequences. We're now going to take a foray into graphic novels, and the first one we are going to talk about is The Essential Dykes to Watch Out For by Alison Bechdel. This one has a variety of lesbian characters and takes place over many years. I found a lot of the same issues that the characters were facing back in the day are very similar to the ones that we're facing even now, especially with the rise of fascism. It is a very long read, but I highly recommend it. I would also highly recommend Fun Home by Alison Bechdel. That is an autobiography told in comic form. That one is quite good as well. Next is Soft Boiled by Lisa Mass. This is a graphic novel. It is adult. Callie Westbrook is a failure. Well, maybe she's not a failure, but her amazing private eye themed business certainly is. All she wants to do is tuck her fedora under her arm, retreat to suburbia, and lose herself in a cozy mystery. Instead, she comes home to find her girlfriend in the arms of another woman. Now sleeping on the couch in the office she can no longer afford, Callie's luck takes a turn when a strange woman offers cash to sublet a room. But when the new tenant suddenly vanishes, Callie finds herself catapulted into a real-life mystery. Enlisting the help of a motley crew of friends, neighbors, and a vagabond cat, Callie is on the case, discovering perhaps for the first time what she is truly made of. From the back alleys and rooftops of Victoria's historic Chinatown to the stormy waterfront, Soft Boiled is a wild and rickety bike ride full of danger, daring, drones, friendship, typewriter repair, and a quirky cast of characters you won't soon forget. I like this one all right. The art it takes a while to grow on you, I will not lie to you, but it's not so bad. Next is Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me by Mariko Tamaki and Rosemary Valero O'Connell. All Freddie Riley wants is for Laura Dean to stop breaking up with her. The day they got together was the best one of Freddie's life, but nothing makes sense since. Laura Dean is popular, funny, and so cute, but she can be really thoughtless, even mean. Their on-again, off-again relationship has Freddie's head spinning, and Freddie's friends can't understand why she keeps going back. When Freddie consults the services of a local mystic, the mysterious seek her, she isn't thrilled with the advice she receives, but something's got to give. Freddie's heart is breaking in slow motion, and she may be about to lose her very best friend, as well as her last shred of self-respect. Fortunately for Freddie, there are new friends and the insight of advice columnist Anna Weiss to help her through being a teenager in love. Mariko Tamaki and Rosemary Valero O'Connell bring to life a sweet and spirited tale of young love that asks us to consider what happens when we ditch the toxic relationships we crave to embrace the healthy ones we need. I quite liked this book. The art is very cute. Obviously, the Butch character in this one is not the best person, but that doesn't mean that the book is any less good. I have one in erotica, which is called 8 Kinky Nights by Zan West. Sometimes the perfect Hanukkah gift can change everything. Newly divorced stone Butch Jordan moves into her friend Leah's spare room, ready at 49 to take on a new job and finally explore kink and polyamory. But moving to NYC during the holidays sends grief crashing through her, and Jordan realizes that when she isn't solely focused on caring for others, her own feelings are unavoidable, including her feelings for Leah. 51-year-old queer femme Leah, an experienced submissive kink educator who owns a sex shop, has recently come to terms with being gray ace and is trying to rework her life and relationships to honor that. Leah has a brainstorm to help them both. She offers Jordan 8 kink lessons, one for each night of Hanukkah, to help Jordan find her feet as a novice dominant and to create a structured space where Leah can work on more deeply honoring her own consent now that she knows she's gray ace. She's planned to keep it casual, but instead the experience opens cracks in the armor Leah's been using to keep people at a distance and keep herself safe. Now she needs to grapple with the trauma that's been impacting her life for years. Can these two autistic queers find ways to cope with the changes they are making in their lives and support each other as they build something new they hadn't thought was possible? I have not read this one. This one has a lot of different interesting rep, but if you're looking for some holiday erotica, here you go. Next, we have a very brief sci-fi section because I kind of included a lot of fantasy sci-fi together because it's kind of hard to differentiate, as I said. But next is Hamajang Luck by Makana Yamamoto. Edie is done with crime. 8 years behind bars changes a person, costs them too much time with too many of the people who need them most. And it's all Angel's fault. She sold Edie out in what should have been the greatest moment of their lives. Instead, Edie was shipped off to the icy prison planet spinning far below the soaring sky bridges and neon catacombs of Kepler's space station of home to spend the best part of a decade alone. But then a chance for early parole appears out of nowhere and Edie steps into the pallid sunlight to find nothing other than Angel waiting. And she has an offer. One less job, one less deal, one less target. The trillionaire tech god they failed to bring down last time. There's just one thing Edie needs to do, trust Angel again, which also happens to be the last thing Edie wants to do. What could possibly go all Hamajang about this plan? This book came out late 2024 and I have not read it yet, but I'm very excited to read it. Everyone has been giving rave reviews on TikTok and I'm very excited to see where it goes. The last sci-fi is The Weight of the Stars by Kate Ancrum. The universe is full of second chances. Ryan Bird dreams of traveling across the stars, but a career in space isn't an option for a girl who lives in a trailer park on the wrong side of town, so Ryan becomes her circumstances and settles for acting out and skipping school with her delinquent friends. One day she meets Alexandria, a furious loner who spurns Ryan's offer of friendship. After a horrific accident leaves Alexandria with a broken arm, the girls are brought together despite themselves, and Ryan learns her secret. Alexandria's mother is an astronaut who volunteered for a one-way trip to the edge of the solar system. Every night without fail, Alexandria waits to catch radio signals from her mother. And now it's up to Ryan to lift her onto the roof day after day until the silence between them grows into friendship and eventually something more. This one is a YA. I have not read this one yet. I suggested this one for my book club. I don't know if they're going to pick it, but I really hope they do. But I'm really excited to read this one. I have one in the contemporary category that's also YA, and it was hard to categorize, so that's why I'm putting it in a weird contemporary category. It's called Girl Mans Up by M.E. Gerard. Like Julian Peters' Keeping You a Secret, Girl Mans Up is a totally engrossing portrayal of a gay teen's coming of age. Penn is only comfortable dressing like a boy, but it's confusing to her friends and unacceptable to her family. And then one day she meets Blake, and little by little it all begins to make sense. Penn Oliveira is sort of chunky, an amazing gamer, and a girl. Mistaken for a boy in restaurants, bathrooms, and everywhere else, all she wants is to be the kind of girl she is. So you're like a girl, Avery asks. Like a gay girl. I say, staring back at her, pulling the straw in and out of my cup, making it squeak against the plastic lid. Colby takes a drag and exhales liquid smoke and swirls. I just didn't want to assume, Avery says, frowning. Assume I'm a girl? I am, so that's cool, I say. Do your parents know that I'm a girl? Colby snorts a laugh. That you're gay, Avery says. I don't really know. I guess it's obvious, I say, but I don't think of myself as being gay because that word sounds like it belongs to some guy. And lesbian sounds like it's a 40-year-old woman's. And queer feels like it can mean anything. But, like, am I queer because I like girls or because I look the way I do? Maybe I don't know enough words. Penn is used to catching hell for looking and acting like a boy, especially from her parents, but in the Canadian suburbs where she lives, there's nowhere to escape to. No Greenwich Village, no Castro, no LGBT club at school, no one to talk to either. Her pal Colby from 2 doors down gave Penn respect from the first time he met her playing hockey when they were small, but Colby has become conflicted about Penn's value to him, and he's really nasty. Lucky for Penn, she's met Blake, also a gamer, and a girl who Penn says wins everything. Can Penn manage to respect Colby's loyalty code even though his jealousy of her has become cruel and toxic? Penn has to man up and figure it out. This came out in 2016. Again, it is YA. I have not read it, but it's on my list. Trying to bring all of you the different Butch books, okay? For now, going into nonfiction with an interesting list here. The first one is Hijab Butch Blues by Lamia H. When 14-year-old Lamia H realizes she has a crush on her teacher, her female teacher, she covers up her attraction, an attraction she can't yet name, by playing up her roles as overachiever and class clown. Born in South Asia, she moved to the Middle East at a young age and has spent years feeling out of place, like her own desires and dreams don't matter, and it's easier to hide in plain sight, to disappear. But one day in Quran class, she reads a passage about Maryam that changes everything. When Maryam learned that she was pregnant, she insisted no man had touched her. Could Maryam, uninterested in men, be like Lamia? From that moment on, Lamia makes sense of her struggles and triumphs by comparing her experiences with some of the most famous stories in the Quran. She juxtaposes her coming out with Musa liberating his people from the Pharaoh, asks if Allah, who is neither male nor female, might instead be non-binary, and drawing on the faith and hope needed to construct his ark, begins to build a life of her own, ultimately finding that the answer to her lifelong quest for community and belonging lies in owning her identity as a queer devout Muslim immigrant. This searingly intimate memoir, in essays spanning Lamia's childhood to her arrival in the United States for college through early adult life in New York City, tells a universal story of courage, trust, and love, celebrating what it means to be a seeker and an architect of one's own life. This is a memoir, and I quite enjoyed this book. I thought it was very meaningful, and it's good to get different Butch perspectives that aren't just American-born people. Next is Your John, the Love Letters of Radclyffe Hall. This is edited by Joan Glasgow. This landmark book represents the first publication of original writing by Radclyffe Hall, author of The Well of Loneliness, in over 50 years. One of the most famous and influential lesbian novelists of the 20th century, Hall became a cause célèbre in 1928 upon the publication of her novel, The Well of Loneliness, when the British government brought action on behalf of the Crown to declare the book obscene. Probably the most widely read lesbian novel ever written, the book has been continuously in print since its first publication and remains to this day an important part of the literary landscape. Expertly deciphered and edited by Hall scholar and biographer Joan Glasgow, Your John is a selection of Hall's love letters to Eugenia Solin, a white Russian immigrant with whom Hall fell completely and passionately in love in the summer of 1934. Written between the first meeting and the onset of Hall's last illness in 1942, these letters detail Hall's growing obsession, the pain to her life partner Una Trowbridge of this betrayal, and the poignant hopelessness of a happy resolution for any of the three women. It was ultimately this relationship, Glasgow argues, which tragically precipitated the decline in Hall's creative work and her health. The letters also provide important new information about her views on lesbianism and take us well beyond the artistic limits she imposed on the characters in The Well of Loneliness. They shed light on her views on religion, politics, war, and the literary and artistic scene, illuminating both the nature of her relationships and her views on the current politics of the time. Your John will greatly extend the range of our knowledge about Radclyffe Hall. This book was published in 1997, and I do believe that Radclyffe Hall was a very important figure, and even though she wrote such a sad tragedy as The Well of Loneliness, She herself had a very long and successful queer marriage for a very long time until her meeting this other woman, which caused a lot of problems. I am very excited to read this after I read The Well of Loneliness so I can get more of a context about it. The next is The Life and Times of Butch Dykes, Portraits of Artists, Leaders, and Dreamers Who Changed the World. This is by Eloisa Aquino. Throughout history, many women and non-binary people have defied society's expectations of feminine behavior and appearance in order to live a more authentic life. These short vignettes combine biographical sketches with evocative illustrations for an impact that is as bold, powerful, and inspirational as the brilliant artists, writers, and musicians they represent. This one is definitely more of like a snapshot of different people, but I do want to read it. I think that it's good to just have on hand a little like, look at this. And I think reading about our history is deeply important, especially since butch femme is always politicized and always used in a way to kind of either demonize us or infantilize us. I would just like to also insert that I have not read all of these simply because nonfiction is harder for me, even though I want to read much more of it so I can learn more about our history and our culture. It's hard, but I am getting through them. I am. The next one is The Little Butch Book by Leslia Newman. Leslia Newman's enchanting, playful words sing in the wonders of the butch, mixing the sparkle of romance with the thrill of the erotic. The Little Butch Book is the perfect gift and the perfect invitation. This came out in 1998. It is only 64 pages. It is quite a short book, and I do look forward to getting to read it at some point. Again, some of these historical books are more difficult to obtain, so some of them will take me quite a while to get. The next book is Butch Heroes by Ria Brodel. Katharina Hetzeldorfer tried for a crime that didn't have a name, same-sex sexual relations, and sentenced to death by drowning in 1477. Charles, aka Mary Hamilton, publicly whipped for impersonating a man in 18th century England. Clara, aka Big Ben, over whom two jealous women fought in 1926 New York. These are just three of the lives that the artist Ria Brodel has reclaimed for queer history in Butch Heroes. Brodel offers a series of 28 portraits of forgotten but heroic figures, each accompanied by a brief biographical note. They are individuals whose gender presentation was more masculine than feminine, who did not want to enter into heterosexual marriage, and who often faced dire punishment for being themselves. Brodel's detailed and witty paintings are modeled on Catholic holy cards, slightly subverting a religious template. The portraits and the texts offer intriguing hints of lost lives. Cats lounge in the background of domestic settings. One of the figures is said to have been employed variously as a prophet, a soldier, or a textile worker. Another casually holds a lit cigarette. Brodel did extensive research for each portrait, piecing together a life from historical accounts, maps, journals, paintings, drawings, and photographs, finding the heroic in the forgotten. This is also quite short. It came out in 2018 and is only 96 pages. I am quite excited to see this. I would love to see paintings and more tales of people from our past. The next is Butch Femme Inside Lesbian Gender by Sally R. Munt, the first collection to focus on butch femme identities since the highly acclaimed Persistent Desire, edited by Joan Nestle. This book attempts to theorize butch femme in the context of current debates on masculinity, femininity, and gender as performance. There are essays and photos in here. This came out in the 90s. This is another one of those that I'm having a difficult time getting, but that I have been looking for. The next book is Women Like Us by Suzanne and Pearson Neild. 19 first-hand accounts of the lives, loves, and relationships of lesbian women from a variety of backgrounds, including landmarks in lesbian history such as the Gateways Club and the first magazines, Arena 3 and Sappho. This was also published in the 90s. There definitely seemed to be a resurgence of butch femme articles and writings and culture in the 90s, and I think that that's very nice because it gives us even more context and even more things to draw from instead of just relying on things from the 40s through the 60s. Also, I was born in the 90s, so it was meant to be. Next is Female Husbands, A Trans History by Jen Mannion. Long before people identified as transgender or lesbian, there were female husbands and the women who loved them. Female husbands, people assigned female who transgender, lived as men and married women, were true queer pioneers. Moving deftly from the colonial era to just before the First World War, Jen Mannion uncovers the riveting and very personal stories of ordinary people who lived as men despite tremendous risk, danger, violence, and the threat of punishment. Female Husbands weaves the story of their lives in relation to broader social, economic, and political developments in the United States and the United Kingdom, while also exploring how attitudes toward female husbands shifted in relation to transformations in gender politics and women's rights, ultimately leading to the demise of the category of female husband in the early 20th century. Groundbreaking and influential, Female Husbands offers a dynamic, varied, and complex history of the LGBTQ past. This is quite a new book. This came out in 2020. I'm super excited to read this because I read Passions Between Women by Emma Donoghue from 1668 to 1801, and there was a section about female husbands that I quite enjoyed. I think it also kind of shows how this kind of predated butch femme culture, but that doesn't mean that it isn't related in some way. This has been, as Joe Nestle would say, a persistent desire for butch femme coupling. This one I am so excited to show you guys because I just got this one. This is Dagger on Butch Women, edited by Lily Barana, Roxy, and Linnea Dew. This one was super hard to get. This was about $40. It is not in the best condition, but I honestly don't care because I'm so excited to just have it. I've been peeking on it for like months, and then this one copy came up on Thrift Books and it was the only one, and I was like, oh, do I really want to pay $38? And then I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do it. Dagger is an anthem to butch women, a fearless collection of stories and art, essays, and interviews by butches and the women who love them. Dagger is an adventure in gender bending featuring provocative voices on sexuality. Pat Califia, Carol A. Queen, Susie Bright, Jean Cordova, Joanne Lulan, S. Diane A. Bogus, Donna Minkowitz, Cherry Smith, Aki Obeya, Julie Tolentino, Jen Olson, Jackie Weltman, Diane DiMassa, Andrea Natalie, Joan Hilty, Trina Robbins, and others, plus gorgeous and hot photographs by Phyllis Christopher, Della Grace, Morgan Gwenwald, and Jill Posner. Dagger is edited by two butches and a Barracuda femme. Roxy is publisher of Girl Jock, the alternative sportswomen's magazine. Linnea Dew is a novelist and author of the forthcoming Joining the Tribe, Growing Up Gay and Lesbian in the 90s. Lily Barana is editrix/publisher of the sex zine Taste of Latex. Her articles appear in The Advocate and LA Weekly. So there are some really sexy photos in here. I want to warn you, if you like butches though, leave me alone. If you love butches like I do, and like many people do, or you just want to learn more about butch culture. I haven't read this one yet, but I've skimmed through because, I mean, I bought it for $40. You can't not skim through, right? I'm so excited to read this one. I think it's going to be great, honestly. Also, this half-price book sticker where someone bought it for $7 makes me so angry. How dare you, person who bought this at half-price books for $7? Next is Boots of Leather, Slippers of Gold, The History of the Lesbian Community. This is by Elizabeth Kennedy and Madeline D. Davis. This groundbreaking book traces the emergence and growth of a lesbian community in Buffalo, New York from the mid-1930s to the early 1960s. Based on 13 years of research and drawing upon the oral histories of 45 women, authors Kennedy and Davis explore butch femme roles, coming out, women who passed as men, motherhood, aging, racism, and the courage and pride of the working class lesbians of Buffalo who, by confronting incredible oppression and violence, helped to pave the way for the gay and lesbian liberation movements of the 70s and 80s. Boots of Leather, Slippers of Gold captures the full complexity of lesbian culture. It is a compassionate history of real people fighting for respect and a place to love without fear of persecution. This one came out the year I was born, 93. This is another one that it seems to be harder to get a copy of, but I am working on it. So if anyone wants to send me one, that would be cool. I'm just kidding. I would never make you guys send me your amazing literature. Next, I have Surpassing the Love of Men by Lillian Faderman. This is about romantic friendships in love between women from Renaissance to present. Present from this means the 80s. This book looks quite old, as I'm sure you can see. So that's what it is. Drawing on a rich variety of sources, some never before published, Lillian Faderman has constructed a fascinating cultural history of women's passionate friendships with each other. Literature ranging from Casanova and Henry James to Ladies' Home Journal and Adrienne Rich, trial records, love letters, pornography, and the proclamations of experts across the centuries vividly illustrate the changing status and patterns of romantic friendship. Faderman explores the elusive relation between female same-sex love and the continually shifting theories of female sexuality. She shows, too, how nascent feminist values have always played a role in women's passions for each other and in men's reactions to them, from ridicule to admiration to revulsion. Surpassing the Love of Men is a quietly revolutionary book that brings together forgotten and ignored strands of history in an unexpected new synthesis. For some, it will excite intense controversy, but for many readers, it will awaken a heretofore unrecognized perception of its rightness. No one who reads it, man or woman, will finish it with his or her sensibilities unchanged. So I would like to say, because I have read this book, that this book is highly focused on the idea that a lot of these romantic friendships and relationships were non-sexual. There also is a section on butch femme stuff because, again, this was published in the 80s and it was to the present when it was written. However, one of the things I find most fascinating about this book that it points out is that there were laws against lesbians and their sexuality. A lot of people bring up sodomy laws against gay men, but they don't talk about how specifically dressing as a man or like more butch was prohibited and illegal, but also using any kind of phallic device was illegal and could get you killed, actually, in quite a few time periods. I would read this book with a very critical eye. It was written and published in the 80s, and so therefore I feel there are a lot of historian sentiments of we can't assume that these people were gay or inherently sexual people based upon nothing, XYZ, whatever. But we have to remember that some of these people were probably heavily censoring themselves. It's kind of a double-edged sword because I understand why they don't want to put things in someone's mouth, but at the same time you were trying to completely ignore the possibility that this was more than just friendship for these people. The next one is Dear Sammy, letters from Gertrude Stein and Alice B. Toklas. Letters to Steward from the famous expatriate pair dating from the 1930s through 1966 reflect a true friendship among the correspondents, these striking personalities of Stein and Toklas and their life in Paris. This was published in the 70s, however, it is important to note that we know that Stein and Toklas had like a wedding ceremony. They were incredibly dedicated to each other and very much in love. And so when reading anything about them from before a certain time period that does not want to admit that they were lesbians, it can get a little dicey, it can get a little hard, and it's important to read a lot of these with that in mind, with thinking about that. I have not read it yet, but I am quite excited to read it. Next is Burning Butch by R.B. Mertz. This is a memoir. When divorce moves young Rebecca Mertz away from rural Pennsylvania and their abusive father, Mertz and their mother find a new life in a conservative Catholic subculture outside of Washington, D.C. There, Mertz's adolescence is dominated by fundamentalist Catholicism. Life becomes God, saints, and babies, except, of course, for the show tunes they latch onto, voices that permeate their childhood boundaries, singing about different worlds. Mertz spends their childhood split between Pennsylvania and Maryland, between mother and father, between Catholic homeschooling and a secular Americana, between safety and violence, between their real life and the world they keep being warned against. It's in homeschooling that Mertz learns what good Catholic values are: anti-feminist, pro-life, anti-queer, pro-Jesus. The more babies, the better, so as to prove a stronger devotion to God. In an attempt to get away from their father, to interrogate their faith, and to repress the growing feelings Mertz has about a woman in their community, Mertz chooses the Franciscan University of Steubenville, a conservative Catholic school in Ohio. As Mertz comes of age at an oppressive, gender-dependent Catholic college in the early aughts, they grapple with attractions, sexual encounters, and relationships with friends and teachers, men and women whom they trust and admire, who romantically engage with them while in the same breath renounce the sacrilege of Mertz's identity. Ever the outcast during their college years despite their affinity and aptitude for poetry, Mertz is forced to face their sexuality and what it might mean within the confines of their strict faith. As Mertz struggles to navigate this repressive environment and questions what role they could play in this community, the vulnerable identity they create begins to threaten the life they know in potentially irreversible ways. Again, I feel that that memoir is quite straightforward, and I look forward to reading that. I hope you guys have some interesting things to share. Next, we have The Stonewall Reader, which was edited by the New York Public Library. Drawing from the New York Public Library's archives, The Stonewall Reader presents a collection of first accounts, diaries, periodic literature, and articles from LGBTQ magazines and newspapers chronicling the years leading up to and the years following the Stonewall Uprising, the most significant event in the history of the gay liberation movement and the catalyst for the modern fight for LGBTQ rights. Spotlighting incredible activists like Sylvia Rivera, co-founder of Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, STAR, and forgotten figures like Ernestine Eckstein, one of the few out African-American lesbian activists in the 1960s. The Stonewall Reader is a powerful testament both to the exceptional people who helped shape a movement and to the crucial event that changed the course of LGBTQ rights in the United States. This book I have read, and it has a lot of first-hand accounts, and it also has a lot of things from before Stonewall and then things from after Stonewall. I think it's important to know that the 70s brought this wave of lesbian feminism, which firmly rejected the butch femme culture from the 40s to the 60s in a way that was very ostracizing, particularly to both butches and femmes. And so this is kind of a taste of some of the pre-1970s, the Stonewall riot, which was in 69, and then the wave of feminism, particularly lesbian feminism, that came afterwards. There's of course also things about other LGBT identities, but since we're talking about butches specifically, I just wanted you to know kind of the context of this book. Last in the nonfiction section is The Persistent Desire, Femme Butch Reader, which was edited by Joan Nestle, but it has many contributors and some more historical works as well. Surveys a decade of the attempt to reconstruct and understand the meaning and value of butch-femme relations for the contemporary lesbian, drawing on oral history, fiction, poetry, and fantasy. This was published in '92. I recently read this. You can find free copies of PDFs, which is how I read it. This book is incredibly difficult to find. This book meant so much to me, it made me cry, and I haven't cried since Harrow the Ninth. And it felt so wonderful to be seen as a femme who deeply loves butches, but who is also, when coming out in 2013, deeply shamed for even the idea that lesbians would like butch women, or butch people who are not women. We're not going to pretend that it's not, like, woman is not the correct word all the time, but in the context of them shaming me, women is the right word, because they'd say things like, why would you want to be with women who look like men, blah, 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 blah. I'm sure all of us have heard it, right? It's not comfortable. It's very deeply upsetting, honestly. This book also talks a lot about the wave of feminism I was just talking about from the 70s, and how it made butch and femmes victims of the patriarchy. It made it seem obvious that butches would want to emulate men and therefore try to take their role. And then they not only victimized femmes, but they infantilized them by being like, they don't actually know what they really want. On top of that, there was also this kind of prevailing idea that femmes are not really gay. And that's just very harmful and reductive. I found this book to be absolutely amazing. And if you're feeling particularly lonely right now as someone who is butch or femme, I highly recommend reading this, because it made me feel really seen. And there were these people talking about butch femme 30 years after when it supposedly ended, only for there to clearly be some kind of resurgence in the 90s. I think this book is an absolute must read. It is 500 pages, but there's also a lot of poetry, not just articles, and there's some short stories. So it's not like it's all very difficult to read like some of the articles are. Okay, we're now at the subjective section, where I have read all of these and I will plead my cases as to why I think that these books have butch representation, and I will tell you about them. So first, I would like to bring to the section where I plead my case, She Who Became the Sun, with its sequel, He Who Drowned the World. Now, I haven't read this one yet, so I can't quote anything on this one. This one is on my TBR for this year specifically. But this one I can speak to. I feel that people believe that butchness is cis women only, and there's very rigid ideas for gender of an identity that encompasses a lot of different people, not just cis people. And She Who Became the Sun is a tale of someone who was assigned female at birth, taking on the role of her dead brother and living as a man, and then having a relationship with a woman later. This book is phenomenal, not only because it is so interesting and great and such a beautiful, rich fantasy, honestly, but because I think that butchness often does include many different gender presentations and does include non-binary people. There has been a lot of pushback about whether lesbianism includes non-binary people, and it does. It certainly does. And honestly, because of the historical context and all these other things, the gender of the main character seems to be quite fluid. It seems to be, I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm a man, I'm a woman, when in reality we know that the reality is somewhere in between. So that's why I'm arguing that this could constitute butch representation, but it does not have to. But also, like a lot of the history books we were just talking about, it is a very queer experience to pretend to be a man in order to live your life queer and free. And so I do feel like that one should be included, in my opinion. It's just my opinion. The next is Revolutionary Girl Utena by Chio Saito. There is a 39 episode anime and also a movie. I have all of the manga, including the 2013 sequel and the movie manga. These are quite difficult to get. I will not pretend they aren't. Revolutionary Girl Utena, I feel, could be Butch representation because there is so much playing with gender within this story, particularly the anime and the movie. But even in the manga, there is a lot of questioning of masculinity and femininity and a lot of differences with gender and gender expression. Utena really sees herself as a prince for a lot of it, and Anthe is kind of like her princess. I would like to warn anyone before they get into this series that there are very heavy topics, particularly for the anime and the movie. Don't just go into it thinking it's going to be a silly, goofy time. It's not. Please read the trigger warnings for any book or especially the anime for this series. It is very difficult and it can be very hard to watch. However, there is some of the harder scenes is something that is so relatable to me that I felt so seen and also so deeply triggered. Like it was very difficult to watch. However, I do feel that Utena gives Butch vibes, and I will not take any arguments. I feel a lot of people agree with me. Next, I have more than one of these, but these are the Lumberjanes graphic novels. They are done by multiple different artists, including N.D. Stevenson, who was responsible for the She-Ra reboot, and Nona. I would like to argue that Mal is Butch and is in relationship with another girl in this series. The series is very cute and a very easy light read if you're interested. I'm pretty sure it's YA. There's nothing too offensive or ridiculous in here. But again, it's sometimes hard to put labels on people that they didn't explicitly say it. So I'm just asserting that it's arguable. It's arguable. It's not 100%, but it's arguable. Next is Girl Crushed by Katie Heaney. This is a very messy YA that includes like a long-term relationship breakup and then the more Butch characters, or like more masculine, I should say, the more masculine characters' relationship with a new bi girl that kind of goes awry. I've seen people really not like this book and be incredibly critical. I actually quite liked it. Again, I don't feel that the word butch was ever like thrown around, but I feel again that it's quite arguable. You could make the argument. Next, we have Deus Ex Mechanic by Ryan Fletcher. It is book 1 of the Cricket Chronicles. This has 2 older queers who are, I want to say, in their 50s, and the main character, I would certainly say, feels like a butch lesbian to me. Again, when we get into like sci-fi, fantasy, that kind of stuff, I feel like the labels are more things that we put on them, and the authors oftentimes do not tie it back to like traditional butch culture or even modern butch culture, and that's fine. But I do think you can still make the argument if you so choose, which I am choosing. All that being said, I didn't love this book, but I didn't hate it. So you might want to give it a try. I don't know, but it's a mechanic in space and there's a hot pirate. Super fun. My next argument is for Of Fire and Stars by Audrey Colthurst. This one is another YA. It is a fantasy. It definitely has the princess trying to act like a prince scenario. I did have this book. I ended up selling it. Like, it was fine. It was kind of cute, you know, but I think for a YA, it's perfectly fine. There's the whole trope of one of them being betrothed to the other one's brother, so that's a little dicey. But yeah, there was basically, in my opinion, a butch horse lesbian. I really enjoyed it. Speaking of long-haired butches, let's talk about The Gilded Crown and the sequel, The Antlered King by Marianne Gordon. I've only read the first one again, but I highly enjoyed it. If you like necromancy, you might really like this one. I personally did. Yeah, but I would personally put Princess Sullivan into the long-haired butch category. She's running around doing very princely things, being very butch, in my opinion, much more masked, not super girly. And I think because it's fantasy, I personally think you can make the argument. I think you can make the argument, and I am. And I pictured her as a long-haired butch the entire time. Do with that what you will. This is where it gets a little bit dicey for me because I feel like other people have said this, but I'm kind of on the fence. So this is Legends and Lattes and Bookshops and Bone Dust, both by Travis Baldry. I have read both of these, and I feel like it's always about Viv being butch and then like Tangerine not, right? I feel that this is a little bit dicey simply because of fantasy races and the way we perceive things, right? So I'm not saying that Viv can't be butch and an orc. I'm not saying that. That would be cool. I would love that, which is why I say it's arguable. However, I think we also need to take into account a lot of fantasy races are coded with like racialized aspects to them, and that can be quite problematic. So a lot of times, unfortunately, orcs in particular are coded to have, again, very racialized stereotypes, and combining that with like an unfeminine woman could be quite the problem, is my only concern with these. Again, I'm not saying that Viv can't be Butch. As a matter of fact, I pictured Viv as Butch the entire time. Again, long-haired Butch. Get in line, right? But I think we need to be careful before we run around and make bold declarations, especially when there are potentially, even fantasy-wise, racialized politics that we need to be taking into consideration. And I don't think we'd have to take it into as much consideration if the authors of these specific genres thought a lot harder and more intentionally about how they felt about that kind of stuff and what they meant to be saying. But unfortunately for all of us, we don't really get to have that because of the authors. Okay, now we have The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea by Maggie Takuta Hall. There is a sequel, but the two main characters that I will be talking about are less featured in the second one. So again, there is someone who is assigned female at birth, pretending to be a man for safety and for job security reasons and other things, and falling in love with like a very pretty lady. Again, I think that that character could be non-binary without being a butch lesbian, and that's totally fine and that's totally acceptable, and I'm totally down to clown with that. However, again, as we said in the other one, there is a very complicated relationship between lesbianism, particularly butchness, and gender. So I think you could make the argument for this book specifically, but I can also see the other arguments. I'm not saying it has to be, that's why it's honorable mention. This is basically honorable mentioning category. Okay. Next we have For Her Consideration and At Her Service. These are both by Amy Spalding. I read the second one, At Her Service. I don't feel, when I was reading it, and I did a search in the search bar too on my ebooks, I don't feel that there was ever like explicitly said that these characters were butch. So I again feel that it is arguable. I feel that you can argue that they are if you want to, and you can kind of project that onto them. But at the same time, there is no confirmation. So it's important to like keep that in the back of our minds. But at the same time, as far as I know, the author hasn't come forward and said that like, no, they're not butches. You can't do that. So we're doing what we want. If people on the internet can pretend that men are butch lesbians, we can project onto regular lesbians, and that's my opinion. The next one is Party Animal by Allie K. Mulford. This is also a contemporary romance. This is fake dating. I have not read this one yet, so that's why I'm putting it in the arguable category. I can't say for sure if this character identifies with butchness or not. Like some of these characters very specifically say they're masc or they're studs or whatever, but not as many say it as don't say it. And I think it's because they kind of want that ambiguity because it's a romance and they want you to project what you want onto the characters. So again, kind of a gray area. The next one is Like Other Girls by Britta Lunden. This one is a contemporary YA book. This one specifically has like a girl playing football type trope. I think that that is very interesting. Again, I haven't read this one. I don't know for sure. And again, especially with YA and teenagers, it's very difficult because teenagers always have like a differing perception of lesbianism when they're first coming out. And even if they do feel connected to butch femme, they might feel pressured to not feel connected to that, or to choose the term masc instead, or to do whatever, you know? So it's very difficult to just like say, yes, this is a butch character, especially when I haven't read it. Again, this is the you could make the argument section. The next one is Avery Daniels is Off Limits by Season Vining. I am intending to put up a full rant review about this one. I am putting this as an honorable mention again because like I've read it. There's nothing to say that Avery is or is not butch, just in the masculine realm of things, right? Like I personally don't like Season Vining's writing. I find all of the main characters quite cringe and unrelatable. They are holier than thou. They are quite annoying. I do not like them. That being said, I do want to just include butch books in general because I want people to have lots to choose from because it's really important to feel seen and to feel heard in media and to feel like you're being represented or your relationship is being represented. And so therefore, I don't want to limit you from all the options at your disposal. This book has an almost 4-star rating. I think it was marginally better than the first book I read by Season Vining, but I don't personally feel that it was significant enough to really quantify it super easily. But again, I want you to have all your options. So while I personally hate this book, you might not. And then I saved some of my favorites for last for arguable, which is The Midnight Lie and The Hollow Heart by Marie Rutkoski. These are both YA fantasy. This duology is incredible, but I would like to propose. I would like to propose that Sid is butch. And I don't know, there's just something about Sid. Sid just reads as so butch to me. I can't not say it, okay? Like, I know that it's fantasy and that it's harder to label characters as butch femme or whatever, but I'm saying it with my chest. I feel that Sid reads very much butch. That's all I gotta say about that. I just want to finish off this video by saying butches are so important to the community and to me personally. Seeing my wife embrace herself was like something so wonderful to see. She did not know she was butch initially, and seeing her transformation was just wonderful and beautiful. We've been together for all of our adult lives. And I just remember I had such a hard time in high school because I was attracted to butch women, and there was, as soon as I came out, this perception of like, well, why would you be with them? They're just like men anyway, but they can't give you what men give you. And that's just wrong. It's wrong and it's bigoted. Butches have done so much for the community, and it is important to honor them and recognize them. And also femmes too, but like femmes are not the focus of this right now, okay? Just want you guys to know that. Butches have done a lot for our community, and it is important to recognize and appreciate them. And I wanted to make a video about representation for them for a reason. I sincerely hope that there will be so many more books with butches in them for years to come, that we will be able to enjoy these kinds of books for a long time, and that just more and more will be released. Thank you guys so much for watching. I would normally say that I will see you on Friday, but I am going to have a bonus video, like I said, so I hope to see you in the next one, and I hope you guys are having a wonderful Pride Month. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Please give me any recs you have that I did not mention. I am always building my insane TBR, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!